So hi everyone, thank you for joining us on the fourth day of our Student Startup Festival on this fine Thursday afternoon. So just as an introduction, if you haven't joined us previously and you're joining us for the first time, Textbook Ventures is a student-run organisation empowering students looking to enter the startup scene or looking to kickstart their own entrepreneurial pursuits. So my name is Sharon, I'm currently the events coordinator here at Textbook Ventures, and I'll be your MC for today. So today we're extremely fortunate to be hearing from Anna Cheng, who is currently the Growth Marketing Manager at Brighte, and she'll be running the highly anticipated growth workshop. So before we begin, just a couple of digital housekeeping. For those in the audience, please keep yourself on mute to avoid any disruptions, but feel free to leave your videos on. And if you have any questions for Anna, we will have a 10-minute Q&A session towards the end, so please feel free to pop your questions in the chat below. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Anna to introduce herself and to get us started.
Thanks, Sharon. Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out of your Thursday night to listen to me talk. I think, when I was in uni, I sort of attended like 12 to 24 growth talks a year just to take notes and understand what growth is. So I'm really glad you came, and I definitely think that you're on the right path. So just a bit about me and where I started and what I did at uni. So I actually went to UNSW with a commerce and economics degree. My mum's a CFO, so I always thought I wanted to be very similar to her. So I did accounting for 2 years in my first 2 years of uni, and I just hated it after 6 months. So I sort of went, 0 to 100 and started my first company when I was 19 years old. Like the sort of thought process behind that was like, worst case scenario, I'll go back to corporate and I can always do the internship and grad thing later. So, I always felt like uni was a bit of a safety net for me to experiment a bit with my career. So the first company I started was a company called Foodie, and the idea of Foodie was to connect home chefs with consumers. The idea was, if you're cooking up 6 portions of spaghetti for your family, the cost of cooking with that extra portion is super low effort, and low cost to you. So you might as well sell it off for maybe $7, $8, recuperate the cost of your ingredients or even make a small profit. And just to test this idea, I used to spend hours in the uni kitchen, like during exam week, cooking up 60 portions of spaghetti, seeing if people would pay $7 for it. Would people pay an extra $3 for delivery? Would people go and pick up from a central location or pick up from someone else's place? And to be honest, I was doing all this stuff. I didn't realize that there were proper frameworks around how I should approach it. So after I left that business to other co-founders, I ended up joining a mental health startup, and this is my first entry into like a proper startup that I wasn't running and fudging along the way. So I joined a startup that was actually part of an accelerator program called Brighte. And during that year, I attended a bunch of growth talks, like I mentioned. And then I've just been seeing at so many that eventually the event organizer was like, hey, I've seen you at so many growth events. Would you like to start speaking at one? We don't get as many female speakers. And, I was feeling so unconfident. I felt like, massive imposter syndrome. And I was just like, oh, I'm sorry, but, I'm not even in Sydney that day. And he was like, oh, no worries. I'll just change the date for you. So I literally had no excuse anymore. And so what I ended up doing was I did that talk, and then the CEO of Spaceship found me then. And I guess that's where I'll refer a lot to in my talk. And I'll talk a lot about Spaceship and, sort of what I did there. But basically what happened was he caught up with me for coffee, asked me if I wanted to join. I told him that entire interview, I'm not as good as he thinks. And he was like, no, I really like your attitude. And so what I did was I quit my banking internship that was meant to start the next day. I literally just called them. I said, sorry, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I'm doing something different this summer. I deferred uni for the rest of the year, and I just focused on Spaceship. So when I joined Spaceship, we were literally only 6 people. So I was their 3rd employee who wasn't a co-founder. And we used to just be like 2 tables in the back of the Tyro FinTech Hub, which is the co-working space. And we had no customers, no product in market, very little investment. And we were just sort of basically starting from scratch. And I think looking back now, I was like, oh, it was a bit of a rash decision for me to join startups after that, without thinking, what if I got fired in 2 months? I have no uni, no internship to go back to. But at the time, I think it was just a bit of like youthful optimism. So I ended up, spending a lot of time at Spaceship, and in my first 4 months, I was able to get them build up a wait list of 40,000 people, which converted into $100 million in funds under management. Off the back of that, we were able to raise $20 million at a $70 million valuation of some of the world's most prestigious investors, including Sequoia Capital, who was early investors in like Facebook, Dropbox, Airbnb, NEA, Vala Ventures, who's Peter Thiel's fund, Horizons, which is Li Kai-shing's fund in Hong Kong, and as well as like the big Aussie investors such as Airtree Ventures. So we did a lot of cool stuff after that. So I was able to launch our new product into market. I helped them do like licensing projects. I sort of did a bit of everything. And by the time I left, we were at like around 45 employees. We had like $250 million in funds under management then. And yeah, it was just really cool to see that come to fruition. And like 50,000 customers as well. So it's really cool to watch that process like come to fruition from, something I really just took a leap of faith in. After that, I was head of growth of a company called Curious Thing AI. And then after that, I moved to Brighte, where I'm the growth marketing manager. And here I focus more on like customer acquisition, but I'm also product owner of their marketplace product. But I guess what's important to know about Spaceship, which I'll refer to, is that when we started, we launched as a superannuation fund. The idea was, people like me and you, we probably have around like 40 years until we retire. So it doesn't really make that much sense that we're still using the same financial product as our parents. So like, if you sort of take a look into what's invested in your superannuation, most likely you have, ASX 200 stocks, which means that your portfolio is made up of around 60% of like financial services firms, your commodities firms, or like your property. And then if you think about what it looks like by the time we retire and when we're actually going to be taking money out of our super, do you really think that those industries are going to be what's driving, growth in your portfolio? And if the answer is no, then that's sort of where Spaceship comes in. So we sort of created a portfolio which is well diversified, but it does have like a bit of weighting in tech. So our guess is that your Googles, your Amazons, your Facebooks, so forth are going to be what's driving the economy in the future. So we're putting our money into those type of companies. So that was the general value proposition of Spaceship and what they did. Cool. So going back into growth and what it is, I think the most common question I get asked, what I'll go through today, first I'll talk you through what is growth and how that differs from traditional marketing. Second thing I'll talk about is how you come up with ideas, how you prioritize ideas, and how to test them. And then the last part is the most fun part, which is when I go through really cool acquisition strategies and also how I, got to that $100 million in funds under management for Spaceship in such a short amount of time. Cool. So what is growth marketing and how does it differ from traditional marketing? So to be honest, I get asked this question a lot of times and I've come to realize it's really controversial. Like a lot of people like to debate over the semantics, like, is it called growth hacking? Is it called quantitative hacking? Is it full stack marketing or technical marketing? Look, to be honest, I think moving from marketing to growth is not really about the terminology you use or even what tactics you're using in marketing. It's about a change in your mentality and the way that you approach building processes and teams to grow a technology company or a product. So when I showed you this, this is basically what I learned in university. So traditional marketing has typically focused on these two layers, which is awareness and acquisition. So this is particularly apparent when you look at how marketing teams are structured and also the goals that they operate against. So marketing teams tend to focus on the KPIs that align with the top two layers of the funnel, which look like something like leads, number of signups, new users, and downloads. And if you were to draw this out on a graph, no matter how you draw, you're always going to get an increase in graph. Like there's no way you're going to get negative downloads or negative signups. So it's always going to go up and to the right. So marketing teams are optimized for pursuing those type of KPIs, and with the majority of the team members having marketing backgrounds in content, like paid acquisition, you've got your copywriters, you've got your PR people, and they're extremely, specialized parts of marketing. And I think what's important is what's not included in this. So you don't have your engineers, you don't have your designers, you don't have your product managers or your data scientists, and those roles tend to be in completely different silos. So other teams within the organization will usually own the rest of the funnel beyond awareness and acquisition. So for example, you might get your product team owning activation and retention, sales might own revenue, and every organization ultimately is like quite different in terms of structure, but I guess the key point is that the layers of the funnel are owned by completely separate teams in completely separate silos. And then I want you to compare this with what we call the Pirate Metrics funnel. So this is what growth hackers or growth marketers use, and it's called the Pirate Metrics funnel because the first letter of each word spells out R. So anyways, so like what we look at in terms of this funnel is more holistic. So when we look at the KPIs that are tied to this funnel, when you draw them out, you should be able to get a better view and understanding of your business and how it's progressing. So I guess the way to look at it in comparison to the graph before is that the leads, registrations, and new users of like the previous graph are actually just subsets and just an input of the growth rate that growth marketers look at. So we look at the graph like this chart in a whole. So growth rate can be influenced by influencing any layer of this funnel, and the goal is ultimately to find out how these layers interact with each other, so you can identify where the drop-off points are, and you can close them up so that you turn your funnel into more of a tunnel. And as a result, the goals that the growth teams pursue are very different to marketing teams. So at a high level, the goal is always improving the growth rate, but at any given time, the team could be focused on improving any layer of this funnel as they all influence the growth rate. So like acquisition and awareness are actually just subsets of that. So similarly to what I was showing you before, if you were able to draw out these graphs, so it would be more like, hey, what does my day on day or month on month, leads look like, or day on day growth rate of my downloads look at. And when you draw it out, and actually I can tell you for a fact that Brighte one, like in terms of the customer applications that we get, it actually, we get high, like your ups and downs, and then during like the weekends, it's just like Saturday and Sundays like flat, like nothing. It's just like at the bottom, and then it comes back up again on Mondays. And that, like, by showing the growth rate of these metrics as opposed to just like how many leads I get, how many downloads I get, you're actually able to see, okay, well, you're able to recognize the trends a little bit more, and you're able to say, okay, well, I do better on weekdays than weekends. You're able to identify, if you're having a retention problem, or maybe you've changed a product feature and you're seeing a spike in applications. Like, there's a lot of different things that you're able to see when you start tracking growth figures as opposed to just what I call vanity metrics, which is just like, how many downloads do I have? Cool. So I guess to summarize like what I feel about this, I think like when you have an organization that doesn't include, your design team, your product team, your data team, your engineering team, I guess like what you do with growth tends to be always deprioritized. Like every time you're trying to do something for a growth part of your business, engineers will be like, well, that's not really on our product roadmap, and your initiative will always get deprioritized. And I feel like that's just like a recipe for failure in terms of a high functioning technology company that needs to be optimizing for growth. So that's sort of why I think that growth lives at the intersection of marketing, product, and data. And what I mean by this is, can't you really just like sprinkle growth and marketing on top of a product as an afterthought? Your product should be used for a vehicle for growth, and it also should be backed by data as well. And even though I showed you like an extremely linear looking graph, like in reality, it looks quite different to that. So every part of the funnel sort of feeds into another part. And what I sort of wanted to show you with this is that you can actually build momentum. So, imagine if you have a new user coming through, you're able to resurrect all your churn users and turn them into active users who retain and are more likely to refer, which also feeds back into bringing you new users. So I think something I really want to show you, and you'll notice this when I go through what I did for Spaceship, is that building up momentum in terms of growth is really important. Cool. So to summarize, what are the key things you need to build massive growth? First, you need to build core product value, which is what we call product market fit. So that means you need to solve a very specific problem for a very specific audience, and you need to do that really well. So, and then you need to get that audience to really want to buy your product. That's what product market fit is. Getting users to experience that core value as quickly as possible. So this is what your activation metric is. Just as an example, your activation metric is basically that aha moment when someone's realized the benefit of your product. So for example, maybe the first time you've called an Uber and you saw it arrive on time, take you to where you need to go, you didn't have the awkwardness of having to pay for your Uber ride. That's your activation thing, your first ride, which is why you notice that whenever Uber runs campaigns like your $20 discount for your first ride, it's trying to get you to do that first ride because that's their activation metric. So that's like all the campaigns they've run to get you to experience that first ride as quickly as possible and remove all friction to get to that first ride. The last one is being able to help your users experience that core value as often as possible within a given time period. So Uber would, after that moment, Uber would try to continue to get you to using Uber to like get from point A to point B, basically. Cool. Now going to ID creation, prioritization, and testing. So a question I get asked a lot when it comes to growth is, how do I build out a growth strategy, and how much do I have to worry about data? Like, I always get asked, is it like statistically significant, to make this assumption based on, 100 website views or whatever. And I think, taking a step back from that, I think my view on strategy versus data is really like, when you're building a strategy, I think it should be based on your own research and intuition. Whereas I think data is more about validating the assumptions that you've used to feed into your strategy. And what I mean by this is like, when you're setting your strategy, I think you should do a lot of your market research. So this means understanding your customers and the jobs to be done. So I think this is particularly important. So you should really understand who your customer is and what problem you're solving for them. So in the case of Uber, the problem they're solving is not like, oh, I need a on-demand ride hailing service. The job you're actually solving is, I need to get someone from point A to point B. And when you think about it like that, I'm going to the second dot point. Competitors and market opportunities become so much more than, hey, my competitors Lyft and Ola. It actually expands to, okay, well, now I'm competing with, why am I better than catching a bus? Why am I better than walking? Why am I better than riding a bike to get to point A to point B? And, if like those, and also are those markets like ones that I want to operate in? So do I really want to compete with people who are walking? Do I want to compete with public transport? In which case you can see Uber's trying to do with like Uber Pool and so forth. But, you sort of need to expand your understanding of what a competitor means. And I'd probably say, don't say competitor, just say alternative. And then really understand that landscape and where they've been marketing. So, Uber in the early days would not have just focused on, how can I do better than Lyft and Ola? It's because it was the first mover. It was more like, okay, well, how do I get the people who are using the existing alternatives but aren't enjoying it? So for example, your super rich people who usually travel in limos. Limos are annoying to book. You have to book way in advance. At the same time, they're not the type that wants to catch like public transport. So Uber was sort of like back when they did like the Uber Black stuff, like that was their key product for that key audience. So I think you need to think about like, what are all the alternatives? Like, how are they marketing them? And can I copy that type of acquisition strategy? So I think when it comes to strategy, a lot of it comes from context and research and understanding your industry and market opportunities. And then I think once you've sort of developed a strategy around that, then you start testing and validating your assumptions. So, maybe my assumption was like, professionals don't enjoy catching a limo to work. And then you start designing an experiment and to validate that assumption, which would form part of your strategy. So I think only bring in data when you're doing testing and like validation, when you're trying to iterate on learnings, but don't use data to formulate your strategy. Cool. So doing like a deep dive into like the components I said were important as strategy. So first was like, who is your customer and what's their job to be done? So I think you need to understand who they are in terms of like background demographics, the goals and challenges, and also what problem are you solving for them and why? And as I think I really like this question, which is how to use this, discover and adopt your product. So, where are they looking for your product, and then how do they use your product? Like, there's no point adopting a user who, doesn't use your product the right way. Like, they're never going to pay for it. They, only use like once a year or something. Like, so there's no point maybe in acquiring those ones. You want to acquire people who, will become your power user, will become your advocate. Cool. So going back to Spaceship, this is like a typical customer persona that we had when we launched. So this is Adam. Like, I actually know this guy. I never asked him for permission to use his photo, so please don't tell him. But this is Adam. He's a startup guy, and he represents 60% of our users. So what I did was actually my first 2 weeks of Spaceship, I actually spent all my time calling up, you know, our top referrers and asking them questions related to this particular customer persona. So, you know, what's your background? So usually a lot of them work in tech, which is not surprising because we were a tech fund. They're around 25 to 35 years old, which is also not surprising because our product is targeted to people who have like a longer time to retirement. And then I asked, you know, what are your goals when it comes to superannuation? And they probably said something like, oh, you know, you make more informed financial decisions and you give me like, and I'm also interested in high returns. And then like, oh, what do you currently not like about your super fund? And it's like, well, you know, I don't really know much about super. Like I hear more from my electricity company than my super company, even though I'm paying like $800 in fees every year. So I actually don't really understand, you know, how it works. And then you sort of like also try to understand the behaviors. So they're like, okay, well, I frequently use social media. I'm like, I always discuss financial products and startups with my friends over a beer. So they're like the common behaviors that you use. And what does this tell you? So this tells you, okay, well, if they frequently use social media, then, you know, social media advertising might be a good channel. And also if they're open to recommending financial products to friends, and I know that, hey, maybe a referral program might be a good like channel to test as well. And what I found out, like when I dug in deeper to that specific test, was that people over the age of 40 were less likely to recommend financial products to friends. And I could probably bring it down to 2 reasons. One is because people at the age of 40 have like a lot more assets to protect. So, you know, you don't really want to take on too much risk with your superannuation. And 2, they're also less likely to recommend because they're the people who've lived through the GFC, and they understand, you know, if you make the wrong move, invite the wrong thing to a friend, like that, you know, that could really come crashing down. So I think they're the 2 key reasons why like older demographics are less likely to recommend financial products to friends. But it does mean that our target audience are open to referrals. So how can we help? So we invest in, so that was a question that I asked, which was like, why were you interested in Spaceship in the first place? Well, they were like, well, I'm interested because you invest in companies that I believe in and understand. I never had access to them before. And 2, you guys give me more transparency over my portfolio. And like the way I sort of just collected this data is like very like hacky way where I just like had a spreadsheet. I typed every single word that they had said and I clustered like specific keywords. And then all I did was like I basically just regurgitated what they said and put on the landing page, because I think it's really important that you speak to customers in their own language and not your own. Usually when you start a business, you have a lot of industry knowledge and you have a lot of jargon that a lot of people don't understand. It's sort of like, you know, if you're really into something, like for me, my friends are really into coffee and I don't understand like a single thing. Like I'm definitely like a Starbucks girl and I just don't understand what they're talking about when they're talking about coffee. So I think it's like sort of like that when they're talking about something in their own language and I just don't get it. And so I just zone out. It's very similar online. Like if you use too much jargon that your customer doesn't understand, especially financial jargon, they're not going to be able to understand and they'll just give up and close your tab. So I think that you have to speak to them in their own language. And so the best question for that is actually, how would you describe Spaceship to a friend or a colleague? So they can explain your product back to you in their own words, and then you can use their words to attract like-minded people. And I think that is like the best way to sort of figure out what your tone of voice is going to be like. Cool. So that's like how I would understand my customers. I think you have to do this step. I think it's incredibly important for you to actually understand like who your customers are and don't just guess like what the problem is, and don't just guess like, oh, this is the solution that they want. I think you need to actually go and talk to them. And then the second part that I think is important is understanding the industry and competitors. So you need to understand who the main players are and like how the problem is currently being solved, which I think I explained with the Uber example. You can also discover market opportunities by assessing your unique value proposition, speaking to customers, or looking at question portals. So I think this is what I mean by like, there's a part that you can copy from competitors. So, you know, if you know that a similar you're a better version of a similar service, and you want to place yourself in front of those customers, then, you know, you can copy the channels that your competitors are using. But I think you also need your unique value proposition, which you tend to find by actually speaking with your customers, discovering new insights. And I think question portals is a really hacky one that I love, which is just like taking a look at Quora. Like if you're thinking of, writing up a blog post and you think, this particular topic is saturated already, I'd just take a look at Quora, Yahoo Answers. What are people asking there that they desperately want answered but can't find through a blog post? Like, that's a great avenue to find something to write about, I think. And then last one, I think, which is important, is that acquisition models are tied to business models. So if you want to offer the same solution with a different business model, then your acquisition model will have to change. And the example I like to use for this is like Canva versus Photoshop. So Photoshop's like a subscription-based pricing model. So, people who use it pay, a certain amount every single month in order to continue using Photoshop, whereas Canva is much more of a freemium product. So, you can use it for free. Sometimes you pay for the assets, but generally you probably wouldn't pay for Canva unless your whole company pays for it. And in which case they have a much lower customer lifetime value than Photoshop would probably have. So in this case, they can't use maybe Photoshop, like Adobe's got like billboards everywhere advertising Photoshop. Whereas Canva can't really do that because they're not making money out of most of the customers. So they can't spend too much to acquire that customer. So their acquisition model has to be different. And you'll notice that Canva spent a lot of time doing SEO, which means like Google search engine optimization. So it's like when you want to try ranking first for particular blog articles and queries and things like that. Canva's done extremely well with SEO, whereas you'll notice that like Adobe and Photoshop have not focused on that as much because they can afford to spend the money to acquire customers. Cool, and I'm sure a lot of you might have seen this before, but this is what we call a lean framework. So once you've got your strategy, you've got a bunch of assumptions that form that strategy, and you sort of want to test it. So maybe you've got a strategy and an objective that's like, I want to get to my first 30 customers, and your idea is, I think, running a Facebook ad would be a good idea. So I think what you want to do is you want to build the minimum viable product. So you build like the easiest way for you to build it. So maybe it's just like, just you quickly whipping something up on Canva, building it, like running that Facebook ad for 7 days, turning it off, looking at the data, learning from that data. So maybe it's like, oh, okay, well, perform better with males than it did with females, better like this certain age group, or like maybe like and it turns out that like the meme format of this creative works the best. So then maybe you take that learning and you're like, okay, well, how do I bring it into another idea and improve it? So it's like, okay, well, I thought this would be gender neutral, but it's actually male dominated. So, does this product appeal to males more? Maybe you do run a separate test. So the general idea is like, you really want to accelerate your pace of learning. So every time you're testing something, you need a certain outcome that you want to learn. So it's like, is this a good channel? Yes or no? If no, then test a different channel. If yes, then how can we improve and start testing the creative, the audience, and so forth. So it's about like, how can I just speed up this process of learning and feedback loop so that I can continuously test and validate my assumptions in the strategy. And then like, how can I, I feel like the idea, coming up with ideas is not the hard part. The hard part is like prioritizing them. And the simplest way to do this is seriously just like putting down the idea on a spreadsheet, like tracking like what metric it's going to affect, and then you do the ICE framework, which is called impact, confidence, and ease. So you rate each of them out of 10 in terms of like what impact you think it's going to make on the metric. How confident are you in achieving that impact? So for example, if you read one article that said, hey, this might be a good idea, then maybe you want to give that a 2 out of 10. Whereas if you've tested it before using the previous framework and you're just iterating on it now, then maybe your confidence is like a 9 out of 10 now. And ease is like, how easy is it to actually, test this idea? So in terms of resources, in terms of your human hours, your money, your budget, and time, like, how easy is it for you to actually run this? And then you give it, and you end up with a score out of 30, which you just average out to 10, and you start ranking your ideas that way. So you know how to prioritize them. And then this, like, I have to say, this is like the most important part. You need to track everything you're doing. So there's no point running all this stuff if, at the end of the day, you're still blind and you don't know if it went well or not. So I think it's really important to track your growth funnel. So there's a really cool tool called Hotjar, which is free to use. Even if you have like a blog or something, like you can like just implement Hotjar on your, like, as long as it's your own domain, like you can just implement Hotjar, and you can actually see like a whole lot of stuff. So the great thing I like is that you can build out funnels, which means that you can see like when the drop-off points are. So for example, for Spaceship, say this was like a onboarding form, you know, maybe it's like form 1, form 2, and then like what tended to happen anyway was when the moment we asked for their tax file number, a lot of people would drop off. And to be fair, I've worked in financial services for like 5 years now, and like I never know where my tax file number is. So, you know, it's not surprising that a lot of people drop off at that stage, but we saw a significant drop off at that part. And, you know, we were able to track that because we were able to see from building out a funnel that, you know, okay, this is the key drop off point. And so off the back of that, what we ended up doing was we're like, okay, well, at this point, let's just put an information bubble and say, okay, well, people who, like, if you don't know where your tax file number is, simply check your latest payslip, or alternatively, call the ATO on this number. And if they close the tab, then we send them a follow-up email to say, hey, reminder that you can, you know, go back to the application form here and you can get your tax file number from these 2 sources. And then just by running that, we were able to increase the conversion rate by like 20%, right? So but the only reason you would know why things aren't working or why you have a low conversion rate is because you need to be tracking every single step. So I can't recommend that enough. So Hotjar is probably the cheapest tool to use. Again, like it's free. And Hotjar's also got this really cool ability where you can screen record like how people go through your website. Like you can literally watch like a video of like where their mouse moves across the screen, and like, you know, how they're clicking through. And they've also got like heat mapping and stuff. So a really cool tool. The tool that I've screenshotted here is actually a mix of Segment and Mixpanel. So what I've done here is I've actually combined Segment and Mixpanel together. So Segment is a data warehousing tool that spits out data, and I've just like basically taken the data from Segment and put it into Mixpanel, and then Mixpanel is just the data visualization tool, which helps you start graphing out data and things like that. Cool. Okay, now for the fun part. So this is like the part that everyone prefers, I feel. So this is like customer acquisition strategies. So there's like a whole bunch of customer acquisition strategies that you can try, but I would definitely recommend that you only focus on like maximum 1 or 2. This doesn't mean you do 1 or 2 things only. It just means that you're focusing on 2 things, but you're going to try to build up momentum for them. So there are a bunch of different channels of traction that you can start testing. So this will so what channel works for your business will depend on the business model. So like not all of this will work for your business, and like actually like some of them will obviously not work for a lot of different business models, but these are it's like a non-exhaustive list, but a pretty good list of like the different channels that you can use. So first one is viral marketing, and I'll go through how I use this to build out Spaceship's waitlist. But basically it's like how you incentivize your customers to refer other customers onto your platform. So like most obvious examples of this would be like Uber. So Uber's, give you get $10 if your friend uses Uber for the first time, and they get $10 for their first ride as well. So that's like what we call a viral campaign. There's also inherent virality, which is stuff like I'd say Dropbox, where it's like, you get 250 megs if I sign up, I get 250 megs if you sign up as well. And then you've also got your collaboration tools that have virality, which is like Slack. So, you only really get benefit out of this tool once you start inviting your other teammates onto Slack. Social media is an inherent virality for the product. So, you're more likely to invite your friends onto Facebook. Otherwise, it's not really that fun for you. So that's like a naturally viral product. And then I think the most underrated one is actually YouTube. So no one really sees YouTube as a viral product because it's not as obvious, but they actually did a lot of embedding early in the day. So it's like so easy for me to put a YouTube video onto, like, back in the days it was like Blogspot and Tumblr. Like it was so easy to just like copy the embedded code and paste it on a website, and then basically it's just like, oh well, that's a YouTube video. Now they've made it even easier to like just copy the URL and autoplay it in social media sites. So I think YouTube's actually done amazingly with virality, but it's just never recognized as like traditional virality. But that's basically what viral marketing is. It's like getting your existing customers to refer other customers. So targeting blogs is just when you're trying to target the blogs that your customers are reading. So this is more like targeting like a hobby thing. So if you've got a specific audience, for example, or a specific hobby that you're trying to target. So for example, maybe it's like you're trying to target moms. So you're targeting, blogs about, people who are sharing mother tips or like things like that. Then maybe that's like a good one. But targeting blogs is basically just trying to be where your customers reading. Publicity, I think you know what PR is. It's just like getting out there, news outlets, magazines, TV. Amazing channel for building trust. Really good for B2B companies. Unconventional PR is like publicity stunts and self-published media. So this is like, it's not a very like sustainable channel to use, but it's like a good for like a one-off like build of momentum. So maybe you just need something to get started, and then you start like working off that momentum. Then maybe that's a good thing. But in a lot of like, I guess if you're trying to be a serious business, it's not like a great channel. Search engine marketing is like placing ads on search engines. So these are like the ads that you see when you're Googling something, and then there's like your top result is probably like an ad, and then you get your organic results after. So you can pay to get your website come out at the top. Social and display ads, your typical, your social media advertising and advertising on other websites as well. Offline ads is your newspaper, your billboards, direct mail. So I'll show you a case study of an example of this, because I get a lot of questions about like how do you do attribution for these type of channels, and I've got a good answer to that later in my slide. Search engine optimization is when you're trying to rank organically for certain Google keywords using like blog content or maybe just landing pages. Content marketing is when you're writing blogs to gain a loyal following. So I've actually seen like this done quite successfully, and some people start actually charging money for like content marketing, but it's a pretty good channel. Like you would notice Canva does a lot of good ones. It's like to build up like a thought leadership or some expertise in a certain area. Email marketing is just emails. Engineering marketing, I've got that as a case study to explain what it is, and it's a really good one for B2B if you do it right. Business development is when you're making like strategic, beneficial connections. Sales is what it is, like push. I guess the difference between business development and sales is like business development tends to be, like a longer term relationship. So it's more like a nurture, like you get them as a partner and you nurture them, whereas sales is more like a one-off thing. Affiliate programs, I guess the best example of this is like Instagram influencers, but there are obviously like a lot more examples of this, but just basically when you have a partner that would help you get sales or leads. Existing platforms, I call this an earned audience. So your existing followers on like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, so forth, that you can market to. Trade shows is when you've got a physical product and you can just sell it to people in a trade show. Offline events is like when you need to get all your customers in one place and you start marketing to them. Speaking engagements, great for building trust when you need to see like who the person behind the company is. So great for financial services sometimes when you want to talk about like who that investment manager is. So that worked really well for us. And community building is when you build up a community of your customers and you try to foster that community, and eventually they'll end up probably being interested in your product as well. Cool. So I'll go through what I did at Spaceship. So yeah, so like I mentioned before, like off the back of the customer persona, I was able to build out a viral wait list. So again, like most of the copy just came from the customer persona survey that I ran. The first step that we asked you to do was just put in your email address. So this was before we launched anything to market. And then you were in group 36 of the wait list. And if you completed your profile, we'll bump you up 10 groups. So this included your mailing address and your verifying your mobile number, which told us you were a unique individual. Then you were in group 26, and for every person that you referred to our wait list, we'd bump you up 5 groups. So basically refer 5 friends to be in group 1. And we actually had like on average, every person who did refer, referred on average around 3 people. So that actually worked really well. And we had like, your tweets that were showing here to make it okay for people to share tweets about us. And actually Twitter was one of a really good channel for like word of mouth. And all these sharing links, like we also followed up with like a email that gave them their sharing link so they can continue sharing even after they're off this wait list. Cool, but like what I really wanted to point out was like, it was a really nice idea, worked really well, but like nothing is new. And something I genuinely believe in is that, you know, the best marketing strategies are stuff that touches on existing human behavior and just like, I guess like almost like existing human heuristics. So like, you know, the human brain hasn't changed that much, like physically, and like the way we think has not changed in decades or maybe even centuries. Like, you know, evolution's happened a lot slower than our technological revolution. So I think like what you're doing is that you don't want to come up with marketing strategies that have to change behavior. What you want to do is you want to tap into existing behavior, existing heuristics and rules of thumb that like humans already have, and just try to make the most of that. And I think, you know, like that referral campaign might have seemed really cool and like, oh, like it seems very new, but in reality, it's not that new. Like, you know, decades ago, people were sending, you know, hey, sign your name onto this piece of paper and you'll become prosperous, you know, within a few months or whatever. And then so people would just pass this from mailbox to mailbox. So you know that, you know, this idea of chain mail, this idea of like social proof, like, you know, being part of something is like something that people have been doing for ages. And then, you know, give it another couple of decades, and then we had MSN, and then I would always get messages on MSN that were like, you know, if you don't send this message to 7 friends, you'll be ugly forever. And like, you know, damn sure that I sent that to like all my friends. And you just know like this stuff has been working from platform to platform, and all you're doing is you're just taking it onto the newest tech, like piece of technology that you have that can distribute it to as many people as possible. So now the focus is more on distribution, not changing human behavior. So I think when it comes to like, oh, what tactics would be good or what strategy would be good, like I would just say, you know, take a look at human behavior. Think about like what people use as like rules of thumb. Think about consumer psychology, like what has driven you to make certain decisions. Like I know for sure that like I fall for every single marketing trick in the book. Like, you know, you see a couple of influencers like marketing this, and then I'm like, yeah, I think I need that. So I have a bunch of like stuff that I really don't need at home, and maybe I've tried using it once but gave up. So I fall for them all the time. But you know, like when you sort of fall for like every consumer trick, I think it's a psychological thing that you can replicate in a much smarter way through your own marketing. Cool. So we have so like, I think it would be a lie if I said that, you know, just having that wait list was what grew our wait list to 40,000 people. In reality, like I mentioned, momentum is a lot. So I think when it comes to financial services, and if, you know, you have a 50K balance in superannuation, you're probably paying $800 in fees per year. It's unlikely that you see a Facebook ad and you're like, okay, I want to roll over like my entire retirement savings to this fund. So I think when you have a product that has, you know, that is like a high cost product, you sort of need to build trust and rapport with your consumer. And I think that's sort of like making a friend. So it's not like a one-time thing where you meet them once and you're like, okay, we're best friends, I trust you. It's sort of like a time, it takes time. And I think it's very similar to like going through like common interests, like common interests, common friends and things like that. So I think it's like, well, what drives decision making in young people? Like it's usually like, okay, well, the people I look up to. So this, you know, customer persona I showed you before was like interest in technology. So they look up to people like Mike Cannon-Brookes and Jane Lewis. I ran a Facebook ad with Mike Cannon-Brookes on it being like, your super is invested like you're retiring in 5 years, when really you have like 40 years until you retire. And for the ones that targeted females, we use Jane Lou, who's the CEO of Showco. And then like after that, it's like, okay, well, I saw a Facebook ad about it. That's cool, but you know, can I trust it yet? So you're most likely going to go to a pub, catch up over lunch with your friend and be like, hey, have you heard of Spaceship? Like, what do you think about it? So I think that's when the waitlist worked really well, which was like, oh, it's a good avenue for like people to talk about us, to show that they are willing to align, you know, their personal brand with our brand. I also did this thing called Astronaut of the Day, where I basically just Photoshop people's faces onto planets, and then I tweeted them out and tagged them. And this worked really well, because usually like when you get tagged in a photo, you're more likely to retweet it. So usually, like, you know, say you have 5,000 followers on Twitter, like we would just get 5,000 people who'd see someone that they know associated with the Spaceship brand, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I recognize this now and it's associated with someone I know. I feel like I trust it a bit more. We use this like tool called Intercom. So if you've ever been on like a website and there's like a little chat bubble that annoyingly pops up while you're trying to do something, like, hey, do you need any help? That's probably Intercom or some variation of Intercom, like Drift or whatever. Good thing about Intercom is that like if they signed up with the same email that they signed up to Twitter with, I actually can see their Twitter handle and their Twitter followers. And you know, I by no means judge people by their number of Twitter followers, but it was a really good marketing tactic to just send merch to everyone who had Twitter followers. So over 5,000 Twitter followers. So everyone who had 5,000 Twitter followers, I just send them merch and I'd handwrite them a note and be like, please tweet this at us at Spaceship AU. And so a lot of people tweeted us. And that's like basically free 5,000 impressions from someone that they know. So the 5,000 followers that they had would see that someone they know has just tweeted about Spaceship. And again, it's about like that brand alignment with people that they already know and building that trust. Other ways, great ways to build trust. We had speaking events. So, you know, when I say we targeted people in technology, well, technology is such a massive bucket, right? You've got like, I'm in marketing, I associate myself with technology. You've got designers who associate themselves with technology. You've got like CEO and founders, obviously, who associate themselves with technology, like software engineers, obviously technology. Like what does tech people really mean, right? So, you know, I brought in, I don't want to say influencers because it's a little bit cringy, but like I brought in like people that were much more like public figures who were really good at what they did, and I brought in to speak about what they do. So every week we had a new speaker. So sometimes it was from people from VC. We had like really prominent designers come in, like Jane Liu came in, which was our biggest event. They had like 400 people, and they just come in and bring in their own crowd. And so because they were coming into like a Spaceship branded event, associated with someone they look up to, again, we had that brand alignment and that trust, as well as like good, just smart PR as well, and some thought leadership pieces around like our investments and why we were, you know, a thought leader in investing. Cool. So I'll go through like a case study and then I'll go into Q&A. So this is an engineering as marketing case study. So this is HubSpot. So basically they have this thing called website grader, and it just graded your website, and you put in your website URL and your email, and it'll spit out like what's good about your website, what's wrong with your website. So between 2006 and 2011, HubSpot's free website grader was used to grade more than 4 million websites. So like over 5 years, basically they had 4 million leads come from this engineering as marketing tactic. So engineering marketing is just basically building out a tool that can help you acquire leads. So it's really good for the HubSpot and prospective customers, because for customers, it helped them understand that their sites weren't performing as well as they could be, making the value proposition of an inbound marketing system much more appealing. And it was really good for HubSpot as well, because it basically functions as like a free automated consultation device. So like HubSpot didn't need to hire any people to run it. Like it was basically just online and could continue living online forever, just acquiring customers this way. So it's great for generating leads. And the last one I'll go through is like a koala mattress case study. So people ask me a lot about like offline marketing and billboards. Like, you know, when, you know, you talk a lot about how important it is to track the results of your campaigns. Like, how do I know if it's like a billboard? Here's one that Koala ran, like no F&ID, ID, no tools, no worries, koala.com. It's like, dear IKEA, we feel bad about this billboard. We've never had so much hate mail. It's a good thing we can't read Swedish. Please accept $100 off our mattress with our code, sorry IKEA. So great idea. So this went viral. Like, so I spoke to Tim Doyle, who I think he spoke for your event as well. But, you know, like he was like, oh, to be honest, like ATN took down that billboard within 24 hours. So they just turned into a Facebook marketing campaign. But it's a good example of like how you can do tracking. So you can put in like a discount code, sorry IKEA. And that would mean that everyone who uses a discount code, sorry IKEA, came from this particular campaign. Something that I did at Spaceship was we did like a Bondi Junction train station takeover, where we had billboards all around Bondi Junction train station, and then we were able to sort of do attribution by testing like the postcode. So if you signed up during the time that this campaign was live using the Bondi Junction postcode, we would assume that you came from this particular ad campaign. Cool. So that's it from me. So I'll just go into Q&A then.
Yeah, so we'll just jump into Q&A. So we've just got a couple of questions here in the chat. So just a question from Saurabh. What would be the scenarios / business models where referral programs wouldn't be as effective?
Yeah, so there's a lot of like scenario, I think it's like stuff that you would not feel comfortable sharing with people around you. So I guess the most obvious one, which I'm like Tim Doyle's company does, is like men's health or like women's health. Like that's like, I guess like health products are not really like a referral thing. Like it's like, you know, very rarely are you going to be sharing intimate details about your health or your sex life with your friends and family. So that's where like maybe referral programs won't break. So it's usually more like the sensitive things that people aren't comfortable sharing that wouldn't be like a effective referral program. As well as you have to think about the demographic as well. So you know, a lot of the times like older demographics aren't as used to referral programs, like especially digital ones. So you need to think about that as well. And also referral programs don't work. So like I'll give you an example of like PayPal. So PayPal spent when they first launched, it makes a lot of sense because PayPal is the sort of business that requires like to hit critical mass before it becomes like a well-functioning business model. But when they first ran their referral campaign, they were paying $5 for every single email that signed up and used PayPal. And then they spent like $60 million on their referral program. And then eventually they took off the referral program and realized that it didn't do any difference. There was no difference like on or off to acquisition at the like at that time. And at one point you'll realize that your cost per acquisition has exceeded the customer lifetime value, or like that it could be gamified, or alternatively, like the benefit of your product is just so good that you don't actually need to incentivize them to refer, which is the case for PayPal in this sense, where like, you know, the value you get from PayPal is so good that you don't actually need to pay for the referral. And in that case, that means they were spending money that would have come organically anyway. So they were actually increasing their cost per acquisition. But in the other examples, like I guess using your referral incentive, like, and attaching it to a vanity metric, like for example, collecting email that doesn't necessarily translate into a paying customer or an activated customer, that's like a mistake as well. And the other one is like, if the cost per acquisition is just like higher than like customer lifetime value, that's the bad thing as well. So if you're like, if you're a $2 shop and you're paying $5 per referral, that's not a great like use of a business, of a referral program.
This is the second question from Audrey. So, could you share any growth strategies and hacks that have been particularly effective at Brighte?
Yeah, so I did like, they're like pretty, like I guess like the most successful one that I've run so far is like for vendor acquisition. So it's actually quite difficult to acquire tradies. So tradies is like typically a group that's like not online that often. They spend a lot of the time in their cars traveling from place to place. Acquiring them like from Brighte has traditionally been a very manual process. So it's like salesperson would go to a business and try to bring them on as a Brighte accredited partner. So what I did was, because they spent so much time in their cars and listening to the radio on the job, I actually tried radio ads, which is actually, you know, sounds like super non-digital. And you're like, oh, do growth hackers do like boring stuff like that? Like, yeah, we do that. Actually, it's our best growth channel that Brighte has ever had. So like I got extreme distress rates. So like during COVID, like, and also like we negotiated very hard for like very cheap prices. We were able to run like a sponsorship with Khan Jackie O as well as on Triple M. And then we were able to acquire like a lot of vendors that way. So that's actually been, it's just like, again, it's like about understanding the customer, where they spend most of their time, how they discover and interact with products. And I think that's like a good channel for us at Brighte.
Right. Just a question from Bryce. So are there any specific growth strategies for retail and non-tech audiences, particularly the food industry?
So like as in like your brick and mortar businesses, you mean?
Yeah, so yeah, non-tech, retail industries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like it's like the good thing about that is like a lot of the times it's like you're a non-tech industry, but then you can still use tech to market your product. So like retail is sort of like, it actually makes a lot of sense where you could actually just market your retail where other people are online shopping and things like that. Like it's still worthwhile to have a website up where people can visit, read reviews. And I think like actually reviews, I'd say, is probably one of like the things that you would optimize first if you're like a brick and mortar, like being available on Google, making sure that you're ranking, making sure that your business actually comes up when someone Googles your business name, and that you've got, you know, a solid review system. Trying to get into like food blogs. So things like Broadsheet, urban something, I forgot. So, but being in those blogs that, that people like check to see, to find the next restaurant, to find that, you know, next clothing spot or whatever it is. I think it's like, again, it's just about like how people discover. Like think about every time you look for a restaurant, where have you been looking? Like you want to be available on like the Fork, you want to be on Zomato, you want to be on Google, obviously Google, and like all these blogs that talk about food and restaurants as well. But you sort of want to be able to be where everyone's looking, like as well as like probably run a smart Instagram campaign as well, where you get influencers to come to your place and try it out and talk about their experience. I think it usually does come back to tech even when you're not tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question from Daniel. So when do you slow down acquisition growth and double down on low churning customer segments?
Slow down on low churning customer segments. Does low churning as in like your ideal customer, I assume? Like when you, so I think like when you, I think I know what you mean. Like when do you stop focusing on acquisition? When do you start focusing on retention? I think it's really important. Like it's like at the beginning, you always have to focus on acquisition, and like every business will start off with acquisition. And then I think once you start seeing where the leaks are, then I would focus on your retention. So I think it's like useless if you keep acquiring customers and they just like fall out of the bucket. So like I think the good thing about the way we did Spaceship, we launched in groups. So because we had a wait list that was grouped, we launched to group one first, and then we were able to, you know, give them the product, and they were able to find all these bugs and what was wrong with it and like reasons for churning. Then we'd fix up everything, and then we launched a second group, and it was like quite staged. So like I definitely wouldn't try, you know, putting all your money into acquisition at the beginning, only to have them come out at the end. I would like try to figure out, okay, well, this acquisition channel works, and you tested it and you're like, okay, I know it works. I know that it's like a tap, like I can switch it on and it'll work. And then, so right now I'll just switch it off first, like double down on your, on like your product and like where the leaks are, and fix that up. Because like, for example, if, you're really good at acquiring customers, it costs you $2 to acquire a customer, but say only 1% actually ends up, you know, buying your product, paying for your product or whatever, your 2% acquisition cost actually turns into $200, like just like that, right? So you actually want to be able to fix up all those leaks in your hole so that your cost of acquisition is actually much lower. So what I would say there is like, just do it at especially at the start of your company, do it at an extremely staged thing. And like when you're first acquiring customers, what you're interested in is just making sure you have the right channel. Like you want to know that, you know, if I switch on this tap, it works. And then once you realize it works, then you can start staging out your launch. So like when you're comfortable, launch, see how it works, and then keep bringing in when you're more confident that like they're not going to leak out of the bucket.
Great. So I think we'll have room for probably 2 more questions. I'll probably go to this one. So what is a practical way slash project idea at uni that a student can learn about that involves growth?
I can, at uni, I actually reckon I would, like if you were looking for a part-time job, like I would just join a startup and just work on like their real problems. And like the good thing about working at a startup is that you end up doing like a whole lot of stuff that's not ideally growth related. And to be honest, that was like the fun part. Like I'm not like, like growth is fun, but like I enjoyed it a lot more when I was just doing like a bit of everything. I think just join a small startup, and then like offer to do growth and just learn that way. Then you sort of have to deal with like real business like problems. You sort of, and because they're real business problems, you know, they're not actually just like very specifically growth. Like at times you'll be like crap, I need to do customer success. And to be honest, I spent like maybe 1 or 2 months on customer success, which helped me really understand the customer. So I was like working like 8 a.m. to like 12 a.m. at night, like literally just on the phones, like answering questions from customers and really understanding what they did. And you got to do a bit of everything. So I'd really recommend just joining a startup. And actually they don't pay as bad as it sounds, is what I got to say. Like people think they pay really badly, but it actually pays better than Big 4 corporates. So it's actually like, I would say like just do it, like join a startup, like do a part-time if you have to, if you want to do it during uni, but just like give it a go and understand. Like that's how I started as well. Like I literally went to Sydney Startups, the group. I saw this like job ad that got posted by the founder of Uprise. I clicked on the website. It was like one of those terrible websites where like when you scrolled, the text would move, but the background wouldn't move. And I was like, look, I have no background in marketing, but I know like if I join this company, I can add value straight away because this website is just so crap. So I know no matter what I do, it's better than this. And so I just joined them 2 days a week, and I just fell in love with it so much. I started doing full-time, like full-time uni, full-time startup. And then like that was sort of like how I got into startups, was like literally just by committing 2 days a week, which turned into full-time, and like now it's my entire career.
Wow, yeah. So just a question from Jason. So for a SaaS company, what is a great initial avenue for growth?
For a SaaS company, sorry, I'm looking for for B2B SaaS company. Sorry, I'm trying to look for it. But yeah, for B2B, like I assume it means B2B SaaS company. What's a good one? So there's like, typically it's trending 2 ways. So if you're B2B SaaS and you're not enterprise, like specifically want to say not enterprise, then a good way to do it is try like the bottom up method, which is just like having a freemium model or free trial way. So like an easy entry point for people to test out your product, and then trying to upsell them after that. So like very like obvious examples would be like MailChimp, things like that, where you're able to just like test it out, get used to the product, and then you become invested. Like same as Slack, like you start inviting your friends onto Slack, and then they like basically, sorry, not your friends, your colleagues onto Slack, and then eventually you're like, okay, well, I actually need to like search up archived messages, and I hate not having this function, so I'm just going to start paying for it. Or I've exceeded the message limit, I'm just going to start paying for it. I think yeah, like you can do it that way. And I think in terms of like how do you market it, it really depends on like that particular industry you're targeting. So if it's like a small, medium-sized business, like startups and stuff, at the beginning, like every CEO will be a salesperson. Like you'll have to be good at sales. Like you want to do things that are non-scalable, because you know these are your only customers, and you have no excuse if you have like 5 customers to not talk to them, not like handhold them through the process. So I'll just like literally, sales is probably the best way. Just like talk to them, reach out to them like on LinkedIn or whatever, and just like actually try to onboard them manually. Once you're comfortable with like, you're like, okay, well, I know that every person onboards successfully this way, then you start automating those processes, and you can take yourself out of the equation a little bit more until you automate the whole thing. But I think like every like successful company you see in B2B SaaS started off like with like, you know, their CEOs as like a salesperson, and with a bottom-up approach where like it's super easy to enter that product, and then eventually like you automate onboarding, and then you can start doing marketing like a more digital way. So then you can start doing ads when people recognize your brand a bit more. Yeah, like, and being like going back to it, it's always about like being where your customer is, like where are they spending all their time. Sometimes conferences are good, but yeah, like I think, yeah, like a lot of it is just like sales, unfortunately. And if it's enterprise, like I have nothing to say to you other than sales. Like it has to be sales.
Yeah. So there's a question from James here. So is there any value in strategic partnerships to leverage growth?
Yeah. Oh, depending on business model, like not for, yeah, depending on business model, but most times, yes, I would say, like if you were, well, especially for like, I guess like your like enterprise companies and things like that, like I definitely think that there would like strategic partnerships make like a lot of sense, especially if it's like a acquisition channel. So for example, we have quite a few where we just fit really well inside someone else's product. So like I think what do they do? So they do quoting. So they do quoting, and then the tradies that use them to quote actually have the option of using us to like offer finance. So we sort of just sit at like the very end of their product. So like even though there might be a tradie that's not registered with us, they come across like, do you want to add Brighte finance like in this offer to make it easier for like the person to convert? And then they say yes, and then okay, we'll get trained with Brighte, and so that's like an acquisition channel for us. So it does work quite well. Like if you've got like something that fits well with someone else. And like there's actually been like extremely good strategic partnerships in the past. Like just to like, so like this might be a bit off track and not that related to growth, but like a really good example is like what's it called, Turbo Chef. So back in the days, there was a company called Turbo Chef, and they were basically like they were like an oven, but they were as fast as like a microwave. So it was like basically what Subway has now. And obviously they really wanted to sell to Subway, but every single machine costed like, I think like $4,000. So the average consumer wouldn't be able to buy it, but they had this awesome like piece of technology, right? And then so what they were doing, like, okay, well, we want to sell to Subway, but you know, we're really expensive. We're like 4K per machine. But then at the same time, Coke was really interested in securing a deal with Subway as well, because they were competing heavily with Pepsi. So what they did was they did a strategic partnership where they were like, okay, well, if you secure this, like if you start using Coke only, then we'll buy the Turbo Chef machines for you for free. So that's how Subway ended up getting a partnership with both Coke and also free Turbo Chef machines for every single one of their franchises, which would have been like an $80 million deal on their own. So I think that was like a really cool strategic partnership that was really interesting. And then like, you know, now it's happening again with like Amazon and Ring. So like Amazon obviously wants to do home delivery. What better way than to get like a doorbell system that lets like the Amazon like delivery person in, so they can put it into their kitchen and be like the whole home experience. Like Walmart made the same deal with this other lock system. I forgot what it's called now, but yeah, basically to compete with Amazon. So they were able to secure that, you know, really good deal where every single lock costed like $10,000 and not accessible to the average consumer. So I think like strategic partnerships, like actually if you do it really well, where you can really leverage that like friction between two really like strong competitors, like I think that works really well. Otherwise there's like very normal, friendly strategic partnerships like what I mentioned with Brighte.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from Daphne here. So you seem really in your element and passionate about growth. So it's great to see that you've also worked with companies outside of Brighte as well. So what kind of projects interest you currently, and where would you like to see yourself in 5 years' time?
I'm interested in like high impact projects, like projects where I get ownership of something and then I know that like I get to control what happens to this. So if it's a failure, it's my failure. If it's a success, I know it's not my success, like a team success, but like I like to own, I like to basically be able to like see everything. Like I'm a big fan of like starting from scratch. Like you'll notice I'm definitely the person who's like, I enjoy starting things up. I enjoy iterating a little bit less. So I think like in 5 years' time, I'm definitely going to be doing my own thing probably, or like I'll probably like digging in deeper like into a growth role. So either like a senior like leadership growth role, like a CMO or something like that, or starting my own company.
Right, that's amazing. So that wraps up all the questions for tonight. I'd like to say a big thank you to Anna for sharing her insights and going over the time. I certainly have learned a lot for the past hour. So just a reminder, this session will be recorded, and just keep an eye out on our socials. If you've missed any part of the event, it will be posted. So before we leave, a quick reminder that tomorrow will be Textbook Ventures' final grand pitch competition alongside another amazing event. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you guys have an amazing evening, and I'll catch you guys later.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.